Claudius was probably the least likely male in the Eulo-Claudian dynasty to become Emperor of Rome. However, due to the high mortality rate of males in the dynasty, he was proclaimed emperor by the Praetorian Guard. Born August 1st in 10 BC in Lugdunum in Gaul, he was the son of Drusus, who was Emperor Tiberius' brother. His mother was Antonia, daughter of Mark Antony, and Octavia, who was the sister of Augustus. He had been passed over in the imperial succession after Tiberius' death because he was deemed too foolish. It appears that he stammered when talking and his speech was confused, and he might have had some physical deformity in his leg. However, according to Suetonius, while he was seated, was a tall, well-built figure with dignity. He had been kept out of public life by Augustus as well as Tiberius. He did, however, hold the consulship together with his nephew Caligula 37 AD, but Caligula tormented his uncle by humiliating him in front of the Senate and playing practical jokes on him. So Claudius had no real experience of public life prior to becoming emperor. He had spent his time writing history books, and he was a great admirer of Augustus in particular, and loved Roman antiquity. Caligula was assassinated by the Praetorian Guard, and several senators were involved. No evidence suggests that Claudius was directly involved. However, it has been suggested that he at least had prior knowledge of the plot, as he left the crime scene right before his nephew was murdered. Caligula had German barbarian as his bodyguard as well, and when they realized that their emperor had been killed, they cut down several of the people involved. So Claudius hid himself behind a curtain in the palace when the Praetorian Guard found him and proclaimed him princeps, or emperor. He was quickly taken by the Praetorian Guard to their camp right outside Rome, where Claudius secured their loyalty, aka bribed them. Each and every Praetorian Guard was given 15,000 sesterces. This would set a precedent for coming emperors to buy the throne. After Caligula's assassination, the Senate met, and they were seriously suggesting changing back to a republic without an emperor. This was not particularly popular with the people of Rome, who often saw the emperor as a counterbalance to the power of the Senate, who usually only served their own interests. And since the Praetorian Guard had already found their replacement, there was little the Senate could do. Claudius was proclaimed emperor on the 25th of January 41 AD. Claudius was 50 years old at the time. Upon his ascension to the throne, Claudius made a conscious effort to cooperate with the Senate, and he wanted to rule well. Claudius tried to restore the dignity of the Senate, urging them to vote honestly, not just follow whatever he did. He didn't want yes men, rather he encouraged debate in the Senate. Caligula's exiled sisters were allowed to return to the city, and the treason trials that Caligula had renewed were once again cancelled. Claudius also cancelled some taxes introduced by his predecessors, and nearly all of Caligula's assassins were pardoned. Prior emperors Augustus and Tiberius had used their own slaves and freedmen for the administration of the empire. A freedman was a former slave who had been freed by their slave owner for good and loyal services, but Claudius takes this to a next level by developing a centralized bureaucracy with departments led by freedmen. This imperial civil service was completely independent of the Senate, and these freedmen were often not from Rome nor Italy and were only loyal to the emperor. A poorly organized revolt broke out in Dalmatia by its governor, incited by some senators, but it quickly proved to be doomed to fail because the soldiers did not follow the governor, which led to the suicide of the main conspirators. During Claudius' reign, the empire would once again see expansion. The provinces of Lycia in Anatolia, Noricum north of the Alps, Thrace in Balkan, as well as Judea and Mauritania were all put under direct Roman rule under various circumstances. However, the biggest mark left by Claudius was a Roman invasion of Britain, commanded by Aulus Plautius. The invasion of the island started 43 AD. 4 legions were sent in total. 2nd Augusta, 14th Gemina, 10th Valeria Victrix were from the Rhine frontier, and the 9th Hispania from Pannonia. The 2nd Augusta was commanded by the future Emperor Vespasian. Claudius himself traveled to Britain to claim military success, which seems to be the real reason for the invasion, to satisfy Claudius' short-term political goal of demonstrating his military ability. He was in nominal command of the army at Camulodunum, modern-day Colchester. Happy with his victory, he returned to Rome in triumph and erected a triumphal arch in the city. Plautius was left in command of the situation in Britain, and he decided a four-pronged assault. The Iceni tribe was offered Roman friendship, and they would be left with self-autonomy. The 9th Legion was sent to Lindum, modern-day Lincoln. Vespasian and his 2nd Legion was sent westward, taking territories in Dorset and Wiltshire. 4 legions was not enough to subjugate the whole island, so Plautius set up a frontier line across the island and built forts along the frontier line. The southeastern part of the island was secured. It would take almost another 50 years for Romans to establish effective administration of the majority of the island. 2 major revolts broke out before Roman rule had been established. The first was led by Caratacus, the chieftain of the Catuvellani tribe in south-central part of Britain. He resisted the Romans for almost a decade with a mix of guerrilla warfare, but failed to beat the Romans in set-piece battles. He was eventually captured and sent to Rome as a prisoner of war, where he was allowed to speak to Claudius, who eventually spared his life. The second major revolt was led by Boudica, who was the queen of the Iceni tribe. She managed to burn Camulodunum as well as Londinum before she was defeated by the governor Suetonius. Boudica committed suicide before the Romans could capture her. Our surviving sources are fairly hostile or mixed towards Claudius, and a lot of that stems from his reliance on his freedmen. And one thing we need to keep in mind is that our sources are mainly from the senatorial and equestrian classes, and they were the ones traditionally who had governed the Roman state, and they found it very offensive to see these freedmen wield so much power and influence over the emperor. But since Claudius had spent the majority of his life outside public life, he didn't have a power base in the Senate, so he relied on the people that he trusted, and at least these freedmen rendered good service to the empire and the emperor. That much could not be said about Claudius's last 2 wives. Upon his ascension to the throne, he was already married to Messalina, who bore him 2 children, Octavia and Britannicus. Although throughout the 40s Claudius and Messalina grew more and more estranged from each other, Messalina had a number of lovers, and rumors suggest that she even entered a brothel, seeing if she could sleep with more men than an experienced prostitute. In 48 AD, when Claudius was out of the city, Messalina staged a mock wedding with one of her lovers, a well-known senator and consul designate. Upon hearing this, Claudius followed the advice of his freedman Narcissus, who urged him to hurry back to Rome and execute both of them, which is exactly what he did. Behind this strange affair probably lurks treason and a greater plot to usurp Claudius. However, that information eludes us. At this point, the emperor needed a new wife, and once again he turned to his freedman for advice. This time Pallas suggested Agrippina the Younger, who was Claudius's niece, one of Caligula's sisters. Some believe that Pallas and Agrippina were lovers, and that she only used Pallas to get to Claudius. Agrippina and Claudius married on New Year's Day, 49 AD. Agrippina had a son from a prior marriage, a boy named Lucius Domitius Aenobarbus, better known to history simply as Nero. Nero was 4 years older than Claudius's own son, Britannicus. Throughout their marriage, Agrippina successfully influenced Claudius into adopting her son and making him his successor, despite the fact that Claudius already had a son with his prior wife Messalina. Nero was married to his stepsister Octavia. Britannicus was sidelined and kept away from his father by Agrippina. In late 54 AD, Agrippina arranged for Claudius to be poisoned, and the emperor died. Britannicus was only 13 years old at the time, not yet a man, so Nero was proclaimed emperor to the delight of the Senate. Claudius was deified after his death, becoming the second emperor in history after Augustus afforded that honor. I think Claudius was a good emperor with good intentions for the empire. However, he set a number of precedents that would lead to a less stable empire. First of all, he bought the loyalty of the Praetorian Guard to become emperor. Second, he strived for a more effective imperial administration, giving power to his loyal freedmen, which would lead to a more centralized state where the power was in the hands of one man. This would prove to upset the delicate balance of power between Senate and Emperor set up by Augustus. Claudius also started to incorporate the provincials into the Senate. He made it so that it was more important to be culturally rather than ethnically Roman to be able to enter the Senate, and in effect giving more representation of the provinces. This was of course not well liked by the old Roman senatorial families, who were now competing with the provincials as well as freedmen for taking more and more of their historical power. Thanks for watching everyone, and remember, I'm trying to keep these videos short-ish, so there's a lot of facts that I didn't cover in this video, so check in the description below where I've put my sources as well as suggested reading. And remember, I'm making a video just like this for each and every Roman emperor, so if that's something that interests you, I suggested you subscribe and leave a like on this video. In the next video, we're checking out Claudius' successor, Nero. See you then!